Hello, Pranda, good afternoon, hello. My name's Ina Lloyd. I'm part of the Good Practice team of the Wales Audit Office. You're listening and joining us live to the Integration Information Technology through Open Standards. Helo, shmai. Ina Lloyd ydw I, dwi'n rhan o'r tîm ymarfer da o Swyddfa Archwilio Cymru, a dych chi wedi ymuno ni yn fyw i'r Integreiddio Technoleg Gwybodaeth trwy Safonau Agored. So, dyn ni yma heddiw yn Caerdydd, mae'n diwrnod bach hyfryd. So, pwy i chi sy'n mas na? Mae dros hanner cant o chi wedi cofrestru, ond ddim yn sicr faint o chi nas i gyd. There's loads of you listening out there. There's over 50 links being registered. But we're actually not quite sure how many of you are actually listening in altogether. So where are you from? So let's have a look. I've got a list here in front of me of people who have registered, and we've kind of grouped it together. So we've got people from health, local authorities, social enterprises, charities, higher and further education, housing associations, devolved bodies in Wales like Sport Wales, Natural Resources Wales, and Sport Wales. Then we've got fire and rescue services, private sector consultancies across England and Wales, and also the Cabinet Office. So what can you expect from this morning's webinar? Right, you're part of the webinar actually. We're putting this on as a topic because we're just starting the journey on open standards and we'd like you to be part of it. So we've had quite a few questions come through already for people who can't listen live, but let me tell you how you can actually get in touch with us. So you can email, good old-fashioned email now, isn't it? So our email address is good.practice@audit.wales. Often people say to me afterwards, I wanted to send a question in, but didn't actually want to be sort of, didn't feel comfortable. Look, it's about the question, because if you think about the question, other people aren't as well. So please, it's anonymous. Send it in and we'll answer the question for you. Also, we're on Twitter. The Twitter hashtag for today is WAO Open. So hashtag WAO Open. We'll also be sharing key points throughout the webinar on that hashtag, if that's okay. So, I'm part of the team. Dyfrig's also part of the Good Practice team. Also, we've got part of the team behind the camera. Hi, Beth. Hi, Digidol. So they'll be capturing your questions either through Google, so not through Google, sorry, through YouTube. Bethan's also picking up on our email, and Gitto's doing Twitter. So let's have a see who's on the panel today. Shall we? Let's, without further ado. Hello.
Hello.
Jess, do you want to introduce yourself to people?
Hi, I'm Jess. I'm Programme Manager at a lab here in Wales. I work for Nesta, but a lab is a partnership between Nesta and Cardiff University, and we're the Social Innovation Lab for Wales. So we work across public services in various different projects, helping them to think about different ways to meet some of the challenges that they face. So something that I ran last year was the Digital Innovation Fund for Wales. So that looked at some of the things that we're going to be talking about today.
Jess, thank you. Very welcome. Crystal. Mr. Jones, hello.
Hi, I'm Evan Jones. I'm the technology strategist for the Welsh Government, and I try and work out where as an organisation we should be in 5 years' time. That's actually the easy bit. The rather harder bit is persuading people to go there.
Evan, you're very welcome. Hello, Terence.
Hello. Hi, I'm Terence Eden. I work in the Open Standards team in GDS. We're part of the Cabinet Office. It's my job to try and work out which open standards we should be mandating across government. And that involves looking at standards, but more importantly, getting suggestions from members of the public, people who are already in government, about where we're using proprietary standards and where open standards can make a real difference to them.
Terence, thank you. You're very welcome. Right, it's odd saying hello to a colleague of yours that you never really Hello, Dyfrig.
My name is Dyfrig Williams. I work for the Good Practice Exchange team here at the Wales Audit Office. My day-to-day job is about sharing good practice. Also working with the Cutting Edge Audit Office project, which is looking about how we use data and technology to improve what we do as an audit office.
So I might as well start with you, Dyfrig, in terms of why this webinar today, why this particular topic?
Well, digital has been a key theme of our work, and so is data sharing, and open standards marries both of those together perfectly. So for us, it's a really important piece of work. It's something we've been doing for a long time now. We started doing seminars on the theme of assets about 4 years ago, which involved information technology. moved on to doing seminars around digital, held webinars around open data as well. So this open standards webinar really is a really next logical step, and comes from a lot of the feedback we've had from those events about places we can go and things we can do to support public services in Wales. It's something that we're looking to share to help improve public services, but also a really key and important thing for us as an audit office to be aware about. So we're going to look at how we share this throughout the audit office afterwards to really increase awareness. Alongside the important digital agenda, for us, the other piece of work that really cuts across everything that we do now is the Wellbeing Future Generations Act. It outlines 5 ways of working that completely change the way that at the moment we're delivering services, 3 of which are integration, collaboration, and thinking the long term, and Open Standards meets that perfectly. So for us, it just completely hits the nail on the head and makes sense for us to be looking at how we do think about open standards in the way that we work. And the other thing involved in the Act is around public service boards. With the Act requires statutory public service boards to be set up, and whilst they are a development of the local service boards, in reality it's an opportunity to start afresh, to start with fresh thinking and with different ways of working. And so whilst organisations might be stuck with legacy systems, it's an opportunity really, we think, to start to think about the future, to start thinking about how might we use open standards to enable better integration, collaboration and better public services.
So, Josh, thank you very much. So, when we were looking at the delegates who were who were registering for this webinar, we've got a really wide range of delegates. So we're expecting quite a wide range of questions. We've got people from finance, people from transformation, people from IT, people from who's doing capital projects, people from infographics, people from data, people who are working on service transformation, and some others as well. If I've missed you out, give me a shout out and let me know, and we'll add you onto that list. So it's a really wide range of people listening in this morning. So don't forget about those questions now. You can email them anytime. I'll give you the heads up when I'm looking for the questions particularly, but anytime throughout the course of this webinar you can send them in. So I'll just remind you very quickly now what the email address is. It's good.practice@audit.wales. The hashtag on Twitter is WAOopen. So I think I ought to kick off the questions. What do you think, Rose? Jess, are you happy to take the first question?
Yes, I don't know what it is.
So right. I have to say, I have to start with this question. What is open standards? Because we're coming from I'm not quite sure what it's all about. Let's hear your side of the story from that way. Thanks.
So from my perspective, the best way that I think about open standards is that they're just an agreed way of building something that's shared and it's open and it's transparent. So you know how it's built and you know how to connect to it. Now, the other important thing to say is that this is by no means a new thing. You are surrounded by open standards every single day. So if you think about the invention of the telephone, when that first started, there were various different systems and you could only call the person that had the same system as you. Useless. And you might think, well, that's a really archaic way of thinking about things. Well, cast your mind back a few years to something called BlackBerry Messenger. No. So how do those systems work? If you've got something, you can only message somebody who has the same system as you. How much replication is happening within that? How frustrating is it? How much energy you put into the communication that you should just be putting into the communication or the thing that you want to actually achieve, rather than all the means that you need to get there. So open standards are a way for me to start thinking about how we overcome those things.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Jess. So, Evan, from a Welsh Government perspective, what would your response be on this?
Well, we think open standards are standards that are free, that are available, that are permanent, that anyone can adopt. There's a brilliant irony that there's no accepted standard of what constitutes an open standard. The Cabinet Office have produced guidance, which predictably is quite long. The definition I think I like the most is the one that you find in French law, of all things, which is any protocol or interoperable data format whose specifications are public and without any restriction in their access or implementation. And that's the key bit at the end. There's no restrictions on their use. You can use them in perpetuity.
Thanks for that. And I guess what Dyfrig was talking about in terms of the well-being, the future generations, there's some links across on that one straight away.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I have to say this. I know we've got some colleagues from the Cabinet Office listening in. Wonder if you have any observations from what Evan has said. Thank you.
Yeah, well, obviously I agree with what you've all said. So yes, Cabinet Office we've got 47 questions that we ask to determine whether something is an open standard. We never believe in asking one question where 47 will do. The only other important thing, yes, it needs to be free to access, and that's monetarily free and free to do whatever you want. But it also has to be sustainable. So we see lots of purported open standards which are really just controlled by one company, and they've published the specification out there and they say, yeah, you can do whatever you like with it. But that's not really open if the only people who can control that standard are that company. So we work with big organizations like the W3C, who write the specifications for the World Wide Web, and we're a member of their board, and in fact anyone can become a member of the W3C and influence the progression of that standard. So we're really keen, as well as saying yes, it's got to be open to use and it's got to be free to use, that it's got to be open for us to be able to influence. Now, we don't always get our own way, and that's a good thing, but when you've got a consensus, a worldwide consensus of people saying this is the direction that standard should go in, that makes it much more sustainable in the long term, because otherwise you say, well, we're using this open standard, and industry and everyone else goes, well, we're not, we're using something else, and then it's no good to anyone.
Oh, yeah. So your point there, fair point, okay. Dyfrig, before you come to response, just let you know, I've got some questions coming in about your comments about collaboration, so I'll come to you back in a minute on that. Just give
So yeah, open standards, I suppose for me, the way that I really got my head around it was around thinking about them as standards that are collaboratively developed. It's not a good thing before I can't even answer the question on the collaboration. In order to, the collaborative process to develop standards for interoperability of software, data and documents. And really, it's just about making sharing data and working with people much easier, and through them being systems that work together.
Okay, thanks for that. You've kind of touched on sort of part of the answer for the question, actually.
Right, okay.
You said you started opening, your opening was about open standards can enable better collaborative working. The question is, will open standards work with what we already have, as we don't have a blank sheet of paper to start with? And I'll get you to think about that. I'll repeat the question tag. I'm buying time for the speakers to have a think about the responses here, folks. So the question is, you spoke about open standards and can enable better collaborative working. Will open standards work with what we already have, as we don't have a blank sheet of paper to start with? So I'm looking for a response from Dev, and I'm looking for another response from that one. Really. Can I come to Dyfrig first?
Well, I'm probably the worst person to start with, and as much as I'm very much a generalist, so in terms of the technical side of things, then I'm probably not the best person.
But in terms
it's difficult to know. It all depends what you've already got working within your organisation, and what your systems are, and how they currently work. But with a lot of systems, the more open they are, the more likely they are to be working with a wide variety. But there obviously depends with what the nature of the systems we've already procured, what your proprietary standards that they're working to might be working to. So it's a difficult one for me to answer outright, but I'm sure that my fellow panel members will have a better idea.
I'm going to come to Evan on this one. Evan, you're chomping at the bit here.
It's usually possible. It's not always easy to transfer, but in most cases, you'll find that your software will already enable open standards. You just have to actually use it. Microsoft Office is a great example. It will go to the Microsoft format by default, but it's very, very easy to change it to go to an open document format by default. And the chances are your users aren't going to notice, even if you do. When you get down to some of the more complicated databases, particularly more proprietary things, and even down to machine level, as some of our NHS colleagues are probably thinking about, that starts getting more challenging, and that's where you have to get it in at the start and make sure you're getting it in at the procurement level. But even with some of the proprietary systems, you go to your vendor and say, we absolutely need to be able to export in an open format. That's part of what we do. You'll usually find it's possible.
Thanks for that. Before I come to you, Terence, I'd like to ask you out there, I'd like to pose the question to you as well. Have you got any thoughts or any observations on this? Because, you know, we are a panel of at least 60 people, yourselves and the panel here. So let me pose the question to you. And if you'd like to come back with any observations with us, the question is about collaborative. You haven't got a blank sheet of paper to start with. You already have stuff in place. Have you done something different? Have you had some challenges? Have you had some quick successes? Please share with us, and we'd love to highlight them if that's okay. Thanks for that. Terence, are you happy to come on this one?
So there's a big poster in GDS near where I sit, which says, do the hard work to make things easy. Yeah. But which, I mean, you know, it's not about you, it's about your users. What do they need? What's going to be easiest for them? Mm-hmm. And if you're saying, oh, you know, if you want to answer this consultation that we're sending out, you need to buy a copy of this software. Well, you're not doing the hard work to make life easy for the people that you want to respond. I mean, if you, a brilliant example, I saw a couple of local libraries have started installing LibreOffice, OpenOffice, rather than proprietary office suites. And that's great because it saves costs for libraries. But if someone goes to the local library and thinks, oh, I need to fill in this form for my local council or for whatever, and they can't because you haven't done the hard work because you're saying, oh, well, we've already got this system. I think it's kind of an abdication of our responsibility to any of our users. Mm. So yes, none of us start with a blank slate, but through procurement and through looking at users and what they need, that's how we get to a much better place for them.
I mean, I also think there's an element of it just feels like this mountain to climb, and it's not that hard. I mean, if you sit down and do a service blueprint, know what you're using, what kind of contracts you're in, you will start to get a sense of the easy steps that you can start to take. It doesn't have to be about redesigning everything you use. It's map out where you are, know what you're using, know what does talk to each other and know what doesn't, and go from there.
Okay, thanks for that. Thanks very much. Couple of observations already coming in. I've got some questions about procurement documentation coming to you folks. Mm-hmm. There is a question specifically for you, Jess. God. What strategy should we employ to persuade existing suppliers with a good market share to adopt open standards? Shall I repeat that again? Because I have a think about this. So what strategy should we employ to persuade existing suppliers with a good market share to adopt open standards?
Before I come, big vendors.
Yeah, we are talking big vendors. Before I come to you, Jess, I'm going to pose that question also back out as well. Has anyone had any luck in this area? You know, any successes? Come back and let us know. We'd love to share it. And also, Gito, can you tweet out about the libraries if anyone else is doing that? Love to pick that. If you put the hashtag library as well on that one, if that one, libraries innovation, it'll be great to hear on that one. Thank you. So, have I got you enough time?
Yeah, no. Remember that you're paying them the money and that they want your business. You know, it's about critical mass. If you in an organisation decide that this is the direction that you want to go in, and you work with other organisations and you say to a big vendor, actually, this is how we do things because we work with X, Y, and Z, and this is how they do things. This is how our business works now. This is our business model, and if you want to work with us, that's just how it goes.
Okay.
Sorry,
well, I would also add that the brilliant thing about open standards, as we said, is that they are free, which means if you're an SME or you know, a solo entrepreneur, you can go take a look at these standards and you can start selling into government. And if a big software vendor is saying, well, you know, we don't feel like supporting some open standard, I'll bet you that there's a small business which is hungry for, you know, your time, attention, and money.
Especially in Wales.
Especially in Wales, yeah.
And that was really, I've linked to that point to what I was going to say, really. I think that when the Cabinet Office did consult around open standards, that in terms of SMEs responding, you had a large amount of SMEs who were very keen to move towards that. And in terms of the Wellbeing Future Generations Act, again, in terms of the wellbeing outcomes, there's lots in there. One of them is around, you know, prosperous communities, and enabling SMEs is obviously a big part of that. So, you know, it's well worth thinking about that when you are designing your way forward and thinking about what you need regarding standards.
So if anyone's looking for something to contribute to their business case, there's part of your answer there. Evan, a question coming in, picking up on what you said about MS Office. Should we as users of proprietary softwares, an example is given is MS Office, consciously avoid the closed data formats which come as standard for those products? The example they've given is Docs or DocX. and then use the available open format like RTF instead?
We have done that. We haven't gone down the RTF route. We've gone down the ODT, the Open Document Text format, which is one of the options you can use within Microsoft Word. There's other equivalent options within the other parts of the Microsoft suite. And interestingly, when I put to the committee for the Welsh Government, we have committees who would decide whether or not we adopted the Open Standards policy, I sent all of the documents out in the ODT format just to see if anybody noticed. I think in room of 15, 3 people noticed.
ODT?
Open Document Text. So it's the .odt instead of .docx.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Okay.
Well, yeah, and another point. So, Cabinet Office mandated open document format documents for collaboration internally and externally to government, and this means that, you know, within my office, we've got people who use Microsoft Office. Some use Office 365. Some use Google Docs. Some use LibreOffice. Some use OpenOffice. Some are on Android. Some are on iPhone. As you know, if you're stuck with just one document supplier or one document format, and they turn around and say, "Oh, we don't support BlackBerry, unfortunately," well, your chief executive can't get their documents on their BlackBerry. But once you say it's an open format, well, what happens? It means that everyone on all platforms can start using it.
Yeah.
Now, we do. I will say, you know, there are some people who, you know, if they're stuck with an older version, perhaps of an Office suite, can't open it. Now, we don't say you must only publish in an open format. We say you must publish in an open format primarily, but if there is a user need, it's all about the users. If there's a user need for someone to have, you know, a Microsoft Word version 2 format or a plain text or something else, you can do that as well. It's not a problem.
We've had a great question in, and thanks for this one. Is there any guidance on how to write open standards requirements into procurement documents? Great question. Thanks very much for that one. We've got a couple of questions about procurement, so thanks. Terence, can I come to you first on that one? Are you happy to take that one then?
I would point them in GDS direction.
Yeah, so we've got we have this thing called spend controls within GDS, and someone's going to correct me on the exact number, but you know, if you're planning on spending more than X thousand pounds, it has to come through the spend control process. And within that, we say, and are you using open standards? And if not, why not? Now, all of that is available on gov.uk. If you do a search for open standards, gov.uk, there's a whole bit about procurement.
Beth, can we pick up a link on that if that's okay? Yeah. Gifto, can you tweet that out as well? So I just quoted.
And so for me, it's not necessarily about making sure that you obviously you have to write it into your procurement, but you have to make sure that your procurement team understand what you mean by it. Like that is almost far more important than it just being a line and a question. You know, tell them the benefits, make sure they're bought in. That's how you'll move it forward.
And it's one of the things that we do on G Cloud, which is, you know, where suppliers can come into government, is that there are a bunch of questions, and it's like, does this service that you offer export in open format, and does it import in open format? So when you're setting up for a new supplier, you can search through G Cloud for that, but yeah, when you go out, make sure that you're asking. But yeah, as you said,
that's Cabinet Office.
That's Cabinet Office.
I'm turning to Welsh Government. Would that be something that people in Wales would have access to?
Yes, it is. And actually, we go along with the Cabinet Office standards. We looked at the way they're done, we agree with them.
Thank you.
And we've formally adopted them.
Have we got a link that we can share with people listening in on this one?
It's the same link.
That's what I said. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you in that way. I'm going to take a couple of more questions if that's all right. Let me just find this one here. Here we are.
Actually, that's a really nice example of open standards, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can come along and tell us that our standard doesn't meet your needs, and we will take that under advisement. I mean, we don't want to be there with a stick saying this is the only way to do it. An open standard should be collaborative. We're not about forcing it on people, although we do mandate some of them. So.
Actually, this question isn't to you folks, it's actually back out there. Some delegates are aware there's some procurement people listening in this afternoon. So they're wondering, has anyone in Wales got this yet? If yet, would you be able to share, please? So it's a question back out to you folks. So if you've not listened to our webinars before, our questions that come in a number of formats, and they're not always to the panel, they're actually to the community out there. So if you're aware of anyone in procurement in Wales has done it, please either share with us now live, or if you haven't got time, share this afterwards, and we'll make sure we'll get it back out to you if that's okay. Thanks for that one. Okay, folks, I'm going to go and actually move on to the next question now, if that's all right. Thanks for those questions, folks. I'm going to be talking about benefits now, so send your questions in as you see fit. Don't wait until the end on that one, because as you can see, that the questions are coming through thick and fast on this one. Okay, I'm going to talk about the benefits. It's going to be a big learning curve for me on this one, because I'm sort of still getting to know about sort of open standards. What are the benefits of open standards? When you think about sort of the public services in Wales, can you kind of frame it for me sort of in that context, if that's okay?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, it's the biggies, costs and efficiency, but what does that really mean? I mean, you know, there's just words that we can just throw around. So if you think about the amount of systems that you might have to log into on a daily basis, or the amount of frustration you might have because you can't access the data that your colleague accesses through a different system because they won't talk to each other, all of these things whereby actually, and it's the thing that I was saying earlier, the efficiency comes from the focus being on the activity that you want to achieve rather than how you actually do that. And of course, in terms of cost, then you're thinking about how you save on replication, how you make sure that you don't have to buy systems twice, how you have the ability to buy from smaller vendors, and it makes you, you know, you can be slightly more responsive to what the needs of your organisation are, both in the short term and the long term by adopting open standards.
Mm-hmm. As you were sharing your thoughts there, what was coming to my head was about public service boards.
Yes.
There's kind of an opportunity here for
I was just thinking this earlier, yes. I mean, when we were talking about the question about how do you get big vendors on side, public service boards absolutely should, like, you know, have this on the agenda. This is something that they should decide across each of their organisations that they're going to write into their procurement, and that would take us a massive way forward into achieving some of the aims of the Future Generations Act.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that. Thanks, Jess, thanks very much. Evan.
Rather than kind of repeating lots of the stuff, I think I'll turn to some of the economic benefits, and particularly people that are coming from local authorities. Where you've bought a proprietary software, chances are your vendor is in, you know, Surrey or Edinburgh or Berlin or somewhere, but it's unlikely that they're going to be in Llywodraeth. So how do you actually get the involvement of your local economy? Well, moving towards an open standard gives them the opportunity to bid for follow-on work. If you've got, it may be something as prosaic as a calendar system that you want to alter or do something specific to. But if that's a big vendor operation that's somewhere remote, one, they may just not do it for you, or it may be very difficult to do. You've got to buy licensing and so on. If you're working to an open standard, there's somebody down the road that can do that for you. You're helping to keep the money local, helping to generate the local economy. You're also building on the skills that are in the community that in turn can sort of move towards building for the bigger contracts. From the other side, from the avoiding the negative side, you're avoiding vendor lock-in. And that's a classic case where you go in, you buy something that's proprietary, and then the next time you want to buy a more advanced database system, for example, well, all my data's in this proprietary format, so it's really hard and expensive for me to move away from this. So really, it's in the first place getting your data somewhere where it's not just interoperable with other agencies around the country, but it's interoperable with the future you.
Okay. Earlier on, before the webinar went live, you talked about sort of very specific areas of public services, like sort of talking about the relationship between health and social care, the sharing of information that way. There was some sort of interesting challenges that you were sharing about that as well.
There's a number of interesting challenges. There's the one that immediately springs to mind weirdly is not the health one, but the justice one, where up until recently, when the courts put somebody on probation, the two systems, the probation system and the court system, didn't talk to each other. So you had to print out the details of the person that had been put on probation, hand it over to the other person in the office, who would then retype it into the probation officer system. Now the two systems talk to each other. That kind of thing doesn't happen. It's quicker and it's cheaper. Within health, so just remember the example I was talking about, was a fantastic one luckily outside of Wales, around a contract for linear accelerators, a kind of cancer treatment, whereby they put the hardware and the software contracts out separately with the view of renewing the software contract regularly over the years, so the hardware is much longer life. When they came to renew the software contract a few years in, they found because there was a closed standard associated with the machine, really there was only one vendor could actually bid for the contract. So they're stuck then with that one vendor pretty much until the hardware dies.
So that's about thinking, when you're making decisions around procurement, thinking about the long-term impact of a decision, because it's around the governance of sort of decision making. Fundamentally, that's what the well-being of the future generations are about.
It's very much so, but in positioning yourself so that you can do the best thing for people in the future is a key issue. It's not just in health, where you could have, really positive outcomes for people by being able to move to something that in 5 years' time is better. You can apply that to just about any public service.
Yeah. Okay. But I mean, one of the things that contributes to things like vendor lock-in is that people go, well, our various IT system contract is up now. Well, we'll just do that, and we'll do the thing that's really easy, which is to sign the 5-year deal. And we don't have to think about it for 5 years. And I'm so often people like, no, come away. Just check this. Let's have a little check first.
So, the question I want to pose out there, and you coming up to sort of thinking of signing that 5-year deal, Jess is saying,
not necessarily don't, but like just don't do it and think that, oh, this is the easiest thing, then we don't have to think about it. It's doing that and thinking, oh, it will just go away for 5 years.
Okay. Thanks for that. Okay, Terence.
So the question is, what are the advantages of open standards? I don't think it's too dramatic when I say that open standards saves lives. So it used to be the case, and it still is in some places, that if you are a police force and you want to, during a major incident, you want to get information to the fire brigade or to the ambulance or to the Coast Guard, this system was designed by this company and the fire brigades was by someone else, so we can't really interchange operations, and that's madness. So one of the things that we've mandated recently is multi-agency incident transfer standard, which is it's a free open standard which police forces and ambulance or all the emergency services can pick up, and it should mean that, let's hope there's not another major incident, but there's always going to be something that happens, and if you're the police, you can bulk transfer information quickly, efficiently and freely between all the different systems. And that, we talk about saving money and saving time, but this is real life-saving stuff. Now, the other thing is around open government. So the UK government gives a huge amount in foreign aid every year, but where does it go to? Who benefits from it? What's happening? Is it working? It used to be the case if you wanted to find that information, you'd have to either put in an FOI and it was all locked in a filing cabinet somewhere. So we've now mandated that all the foreign aid spending is published in International Aid Transparency Initiative format. I have to remember that, IATAI. Now, we could just publish it as open data, and that's great, but there's no way for anyone in civil society to compare our data with another country's data or another organization's data. But by publishing it in an open standard, along with, I think there's like 600 different organizations which publish in International Aid Transparency Initiative format, it means that you can go and grab the UK government's data and compare it to something else and see what's that NGO over there doing. And we are opening up government. Again, it's one of the GDS mantras, make things open, it makes things better. What better use? If we're saying, okay, well, we're spending £100,000 to irrigate something over there. Well, are we? Is it being used? What are other NGOs doing? How is money being spent? And I think that's brilliant. And it means that you don't need to download it in a proprietary format and then open it in an expensive piece of software. Oh, and then you need a different expensive piece of software to open up their data, and then they're slightly different and you can't. We do the hard work to make things easy. So,
wow. Listen to you say that. For me, it's just going, oh, that's Future Generations Act. On a national scale, that's exactly what we're looking to do.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I was going exactly the same. I have to say, Gito, can you please tweet out open standards save lives?
Oh, really?
If anyone wanted any message, I am aware there's quite a few people from emergency services listening in. Any thoughts on what Terence has to say? Does that ring any bells for you? Pardon the pen on that one.
I mean, I will say, multi-agency incident transfer is, we agreed on the standard, I think, late last year. So it's going through that procurement phase. It's not going to happen overnight, but slowly, as more emergency service workers start seeing this and start seeing the benefits, it can only accelerate. And because it's an open standard, you're not just tied to buying from the same 2 or 3 companies that you always buy from.
Okay, thanks for that. Just to give the panel a head up before I come to Debbie, we've got quite a few questions about culture coming up, making that relationship. So have a think about that one. Beth, can I come to you on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think Carol's going last, isn't it? Everyone's already said but I'd echo what everybody else has already said. To me, yeah, you know, the traditional approach to procurement we've kind of talked about, but I think it's worth kind of thinking about a little bit more. It's slightly different context, but in a previous job where the first day I got there and somebody had made a deal so that our website be provided by the same people in the same format for 5 years, and it was like, well, okay, 5 years ago Facebook didn't exist. And so, you know, that's the kind of scale of kind of change that we're talking about at the moment. And with digital, not just public services, but wider kind of private services as well, the expectation upon public service providers to be able to deliver in a suitable kind of format is understandably huge. And we've already seen really good stuff with the DVLA kind of doing it, and around kind of car tax. And you know, thinking about delivering public services that can meet user need, which is something that Terence has repeatedly talked about today. And I think that's kind of the important thing for us to frame here, is that technology is moving at such a pace, and that we need to be able to deliver public services that are fleet of foot and can meet that need. And by tying ourselves into kind of the traditional model of procurement, you know, sign long contracts that bring money back over however many years. Well, actually, in terms of from an audit perspective, providing value for money, you know, what does that look like? You know, are we able to be fleet of foot, take advantage of new innovation, of new services, of new systems? And that's, to me, what, you know, the really important thing around open standards is that it does enable us to do that, to enable us to provide better public services, and to link it back to what Terence was saying there, you know, to really think of it as an enabler for saving lives and making people's lives better.
Okay, thanks for that. So, thanks for your question, folks. I've got quite a few questions coming in about the training element in relation to open data. But let's go back to the culture question. So, a lot of what you've talked about today requires a different way of thinking and potentially culture change. So, what are the steps to make this happen in reality? Can I come to you just to think about that one first?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
So a lot of the work that we did as part of the Digital Innovation Fund was around supporting people with change in their organisations. And so there are a couple of things that are essential. You absolutely have to have the buy-in of your management team and your chief execs. And the way in which you do that is that when you are doing these types of projects, you have to be able to really clearly communicate what your benefits are. You have to be excited about it as well. I mean, you have to go in there with the enthusiasm and bring them along. It's, you know, it's telling them the story. This is why we do this. This is really incredibly important, and use that as a kind of the catalyst for the project, so that the whole organisation starts to get behind it. So that's the first thing. Secondly, you need to understand that there are always going to be people who don't like your project, and you need to be okay with that. There's a really brilliant model around change management called the 3 Horizons, and there's a book by Bill Sharp which I would suggest that you go out and read. There are 3 different. There are 3 different approaches to change in organisations. Have a look at this, see where you might be within that, and start to understand that actually the people that are the naysayers can be used to your advantage. Start to think about, okay, well, you know, what do their reservations tell us about how we can make this better? And that's that's how I would start.
Thank you for that. One more response to this one?
Yeah, just to say, to further talk about the stuff that we're doing here with Practice Exchange, we're running a digital seminar in June, which we're fortunate enough to have a lab doing things at. But for that seminar, we're really looking for ways of how we can encourage behaviour change within organisations. So the Good Practice team have been undertaking our first national study around behaviour change over the last year. And so we'll be bringing the lessons from that with us to that seminar to have a look at how people can encourage that behaviour change and that culture change within their organisations. So that would be something that may well be to many people's interest.
Beth, can we pick that link up if that's right? Digidol, can you tweet that out, the link to register to share information on the event? It's in June, it is. It's in Cardiff and it's in North Wales, folks. Got a lot of questions about training. Interesting here. So let me just choose. I'm just going to choose this one. I imagine additional training is required to use open software. What happens if all staff are already trained to use existing software that is not open? An example this one's given is SPSS. Ah, right, okay, this is coming from a particular community. Okay, Terence, I'm turning to you on this one. SPSS?
Why are they using SPSS?
Well, no, I mean, just because they are. So the first thing is that at some point in your procurement lifecycle, you're going to have to buy a new piece of software, and you're going to need to train people on it. So, you know, moving from version 1 to version 2 still requires some training. So you might as well take the opportunity to say, well, okay, we'll move to an open alternative. Now, the software itself doesn't have to be open source. So, I mean, personally, I love open source. We do lots of stuff with open source software at GDS, but you know, you can go and buy a closed proprietary solution, but it must be able to work with open standards. So it might be, I don't know SPSS particularly, but as long as it can read in and spit out open formats, okay, great, do it. But what I would say is that change is continual. You know, I mean, people moan. Facebook is a brilliant example. Do you remember when Facebook changed its layout? And everyone was up in arms, I'm never going to get used to it. And 5 days later, everyone's like, I don't remember what the fuss is.
Yeah.
And it's, okay, so complex software, you do need to train your users in, but your employees expect quality training. And if they don't get it from you, they're probably going to leave, and they'll, you know, go to an organization which will keep them upskilled. If you're saying, we require you to stay on an old version of software, what does that do for their job prospects? Does that mean they're just tied to working for you for the rest of their life? That's a great way to lose staff. So it's an opportunity for you.
Evan.
I'm a little bit of a training refusenick. One of the challenges I put to anyone who's selling software to us, they say, oh, we'll need you to have a month's training or whatever. So, okay, so the cost of that is coming off the cost of the software then, because that's an inefficiency cost if your software is so unintuitive that people have to be trained in using it. When you think about it, you think of an app you download, how long does it take you to learn how to do half of these things? It's, by and large, users will invest less than a minute in learning a new app, and if they don't, off it comes and something else goes on. I'm quite a fan of that approach. You know, software vendors making things easy in the first place. And when they tip up and say, well, you know, we'll sell you this and this massive training, just say, no, guys, no, okay? We want things really easy, really intuitive to use. But as Terence said, the underneath issue, the standard, enables you to use pretty much whatever software you want to on top, as long as that software will use the standard, which overwhelmingly it will. Now, Terence likes presumably LibreOffice or something like that. I quite like using Microsoft Office, but the format underneath, the open standard that we're both using, enables us to communicate seamlessly.
So I have to be a little bit cheeky and say, should the test be, if training is required to use that software, why are you buying it?
Well, there is an element of that, but to some degree, where we are at the moment, we're not at that brilliant, bold future where
That's
we're slightly going off the point with it. But you know, yes, by all means, push back on software vendors that are selling you horrendously complicated things with massively locked-in data runtime.
There's a story around GDS, and I don't know if it's true because it's before my time.
Mythology.
There we go.
Okay.
Which said that before you were allowed to relaunch a website on Gov.uk, the minister had to use it and complete it. So, you know, if you were launching a renew your fishing license one, you know, the Minister for Fisheries, still have a Minister for Fisheries? Sure we do. You know, had to go and be able to renew her fishing license. And that's kind of the same thing. If your chief exec can't use this software, you know, with only the guidance that you provide them, then should you be procuring this? I'm quite
okay. Thank you, Terence. Jess.
So, as somebody that's recently had to learn to use SPSS, any form of statistics package is going to be a progression from SPSS. And if you look at SPSS, is reproducible. There are lots of others that are. It's a learning curve to learn to use a better piece of software. I certainly wouldn't start to see that as a barrier. I would start to see that as a way in which you do your work better.
Okay.
The other thing I would say as well is actually thinking about what learning and development looks like in this sphere, and actually when it comes to using open standards, actually, you know, the more people using it, the more people are talking about it online, especially that supportive kind of community. So actually, there's lots of information out there on Google, which is a wondrous thing, where you can actually learn as you go. And so I just think that actually the nature of like what learning and development looks like in our organisations, is training always the most appropriate thing? Actually, are there other ways of learning that might help people to get to grips with learning by doing? So, which I think is a really important thing.
The most useless way of learning how to use a piece of software is being sat looking at a PowerPoint about how to use a piece of software.
Actually, that lends a good point. One of the things we were talking about in terms of how we're going to keep this community going and sharing with this community following this event, we'd welcome your thoughts on that, because there's at least sort of between 50 and 60 of you, between 50 and 60 of you listening live, besides the people who are actually going to be listening to the recording of it. I'm asking you, wonder how you'd like to continue the conversation on getting to know each other. I'm conscious of time. I've got a question, a really cheeky question for Terence. It was an eyebrow moment. So it's well understood that Betamax was the superior standard for video, but we ended up with a VHS as a standard, and then presumably due to commercial pressures, question mark. So how do we avoid ending up with inferior standards due to commercial pressures? Great question. Sorry.
It's a really well-founded fear. Are we as GDS, as Cabinet Office, going to say you must use this, and it turns out that the rest of the world isn't, and government is stuck using some rubbish standard which is open but completely useless for all other things? And the answer is hopefully not. So we run what we call an open standards board, and the way we choose a standard is we're on GitHub, and we'll tweet the link out later. But if you go to github.com/alphagov,
can you repeat that slowly? So
github.com/alphagov, and do a search for open standards there. We run an open discussion where absolutely anyone can discuss the standards which we're considering. So we've got, I think of a good example which is in there at the moment. So someone wants a way to be able to report issues to local authorities. So to say whether it's potholes or that there's a food safety scare. Now we're considering 2 or 3 different standards at the moment, all of which are open. But what we're doing is looking around to see what's commercially acceptable at the moment. What are people already using? What works best for our users? But more importantly, we're asking you to comment. So it doesn't really matter if you work in local government or you're a member of the public. Come along to that discussion that we're having, or email us and say, actually, have you considered this? Or as a user, I'm really interested in, because I don't ever want to be in a position where we mandate something which has no future because it's not the best thing. So it's a group effort. That's what I'd say. Is if you're worried that we're about to choose the wrong thing, please come and tell us, because I assure you you'll find a very warm reception. We like being told that we're wrong, so that we can do the right thing.
Terence, thank you.
I hate being told that I'm wrong, but I know it's the right thing to do.
Make his day.
Right, folks. So you've heard about what open standards actually are. We've actually learned the benefits of them. So the natural next question is, how do we adopt it? So Jess, I'm looking for kind of brevity. Thanks.
Understand what you're using already. Go away, do your blueprint, and look for where there are easy wins to kind of bring the organisation on board quite quickly. Okay, thanks.
What are your existing procedures for deciding what policies and procedures to adopt, and use the ones you've already got to put open standards as a principle going through in your procurement and adoption?
Okay, thanks for that. Terence.
User needs.
Okay, yeah, I really thought that. Thank you, thanks.
Okay, so I've got 2 things really. One of them is just around kind of raising awareness. So we've talked about that bit already, but there's a reason why we didn't just pitch this at IT people. We realised that there's actually, really important that people involved in procurement, people involved in public service boards, decision makers, people in strategic roles, so they're involved in strategic planning, all have an awareness of what open standards are. Because in the information age, in the digital age, rather, that we're moving into, it's going to be vitally important that we buy the right things that work in the right way. The second thing is with the Cutting Edge Audit Office work that we're doing. Within that, we're releasing our first open data set, which is going to be released in open standard, and that's just about, for us, thinking about working out loud, learning and sharing and what we're doing. I'll be blogging about our approach, learning the lessons from our mistakes and our failures. And then so when we do scale it up, that we're in a position to be able to take that learning on. So really it's about sometimes just going ahead and doing it, but doing it in, as the Auditor General would say, well-managed risks. And if it goes wrong, you learn from that experience, and then you can take that forward.
So just that you know, the Good Practice team had their own blog. It's called, funny enough, Good Practice Exchange WordPress blog. Dyfrig has already blogged a few bits about that one. Beth, are you happy to pick up that link on that one? Okay, Evan, I've got a couple of questions coming in for you on this one about the devolved administrations. Quite a long one, so bear with. So we've seen some great partially related work on registers by GDS. This work, of course, does not apply to Scotland or Northern Ireland. However, the benefits of this work would be much stronger if done at a UK level. So here comes the part of the question. This is even more true for open standards, hence my question. How can we support the adoption of open standards at all levels in the devolved administration? Thank you.
Yeah, there's, I suppose it's probably just a very short answer by just doing it. There's the Welsh Government have adopted the Cabinet Office standards, and we're engaging with the Cabinet Office and defining what those standards should actually be. I know that Scotland and Northern Ireland have gone down a similar route. At the moment, all of the devolved administrations within the UK are working together to a similar set of open standards for all of the benefits that brings. Within each of the territories of the UK, the nations and regions, there is a further effort to make sure that the public sector as a whole is aware, and this is part of that, what the WAO are doing here today. And we're certainly encouraging local authorities and other public bodies to use open standards and to adopt the same open standards as everyone else is using.
Okay, thanks for that. Terence, any observations to make?
Oh, no, I'm not an expert in the devolved process. I would definitely say that if it's something you feel strongly about as a citizen, contact your elected representative and say, look at what they're doing and how it's saving them money, or making life better over there. I think we should adopt that. But the best thing to do is, aside from just doing it, is get involved. Email the people who are doing these things, go along to the meetups where people are discussing this, and bring that knowledge back into your organisation.
Okay, thanks. Jess?
Yes, I have a practical offer. At Lab, we've recently launched a programme that we're running on behalf of Welsh Government, which is Innovate to Save. Now, within that, there are 3 strands of work. One is looked after children, one is social prescribing, but the other is using data more efficiently. So if you have a particular area where you're interested in doing some work with us, there's a small grant of R&D money that's associated with it, and then that underpins that is a sort of a collection of service design workshops with me and the team, which is a really good fun, but also a really great way for you to have some time away from your core business, start thinking about how you work on the work that you do, and then at the end of that you have the opportunity to go for a larger funding pot. So it's a stage form of fund, but it's something that we're really excited about.
What's the link? Can you tweet it out?
Yes, it's Lab Innovate to Save. It's all on our Nesta website. There's a load of different blog posts on there on the various different strands as well.
Okay. I want to round off now. We've got just over 5 minutes left, so I'm going to ask the panel to think about the one key message they might want to take away from what what I'm going to do, right? Deb, I know you're going to be last, so bear with me. But also Deb's going to talk about some of the next steps. So, considering we've got such a wide range of delegates listening in this morning, it's not a narrow community. Everything from housing associations to health to local government to social enterprises to further education to devolved bodies and lots of emergency services. Thinking about what's the one key message you'd want them to take away from what they've heard this morning, what would that be, Jess?
It's a lot of work to do, but it's worth it. It's not going to be as hard as you think it is.
Okay, thank you. Nice one. But yeah, it is. I have to give mine. Do you know what mine is? I'm licking your tails. Open standards saves lives. I had my light bulb moment there on that one. I went, yeah, it does. So sorry if that was going to be yours. Anyway.
That's interesting. But reduces cost, improves flexibility, improves competition.
Okay.
What's not to like?
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Terence?
Change is scary. It's always scary. It's always going to be scary, but this sets you up for a future in a way that nothing else can. Once you've got on that open standards path, it just reduces all the complexity of everything else that you're doing. So it's, yeah, as you say,
Just start.
it's hard work, but do it. It really is worthwhile.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of reduction of complexity is bang on, and something that just recently blogged on how New Zealand Audit Office is breaking down some of the information silos as an organisation. So actually, that was one of the things they said was around reducing the complexity and more efficient IT systems, more reliable IT systems, better working. So that's definitely something to take away. But for me, I suppose I'm going to nick another one of Terence's ones around user lead, and actually just thinking about, well, what is it? How are people working? Are they working the way that we're working? And I think too often the answers are no. And if we as public services were starting from scratch, would we set up the systems that we have already? And probably we wouldn't. So it's about taking that mindset and thinking, how can we work better? How can we enable better public services?
Thank you very much. So over to you now, folks. We're aware that today is just a starting point and we pitch at that level. So what's next for you? What are your thoughts? What do you want to know more of? How can we help you in that way? Is it a webinar? Is it a seminar? Let us know about that. After the event, you're going to get an email from us with some feedback just to get your views on sort of how it was today for you, and also sort of to try and capture what I've just asked you. What would be the next steps for that? In terms of the webinar itself, this will be going live on our YouTube account. The Wales Audit Office has a YouTube account, and it'll be going live bilingually roughly about a week today. I'm going to say a week tomorrow just in case, just to cover myself on that. Firstly, I'd like to thank our panel. Diolch yn fawr, thank you very, very much indeed. Thank you. Beth, Gito, diolch yn fawr I chi. Thanks to you folks, and thanks for your great questions coming in. I think I've hopefully covered all your questions. Or I've asked all the questions that you posed anyway. If there are anything else that you think of afterwards, please come back to us. Most importantly, the question I posed about 5 minutes ago, you're a community who is interested in this topic of open standards. Have a think about how you might want us to share or keep you going. You know, there's a number of ways of actually doing it. One of them you'll see when we send you the feedback, because we ourselves are trialing something called randomized coffee trials, where we take, sort of match a couple of you up for you to have a chat about the topic. Sometimes you don't even end up talking about topics, but it's about continuing the knowledge. I signed up. Oh, thank you. Actually, would you all like to be signed up for that?
Absolutely.
Oh, that was half thing we were saying no. Just to say, diolch yn fawr am amser heddi. Thank you very much for your time. I'm Ina Lloyd, I'm part of the Good Practice team. Thank you very much for your time today. I'll bid you good afternoon. Diolch yn fawr I chi gyd, a hwyl a prynawn da. Diolch.